All right, everybody, let's get into it. I hope you have a good weekend planned ahead. I know that I do. I'm going to actually be visiting some people that we met at the most recent Fight, Laugh, Feast conference, and so I'm excited about that. Going to their house, you know, people from all over the country come to Fight, Laugh, Feast, and these guys happen to be from New Hampshire, so I'm looking forward to that. And let's dive right in.
But when you decide to do that, you have to be very confident of your spiritual maturity.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of incredibly spiritually immature people, like people that I would not allow to disciple my cat, trying to do that.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. Well, he's of course right. You know what I mean? When you're engaging in mocking, and of course, he pairs up mocking and slander as if it's the same thing. It's like they're both sins and all this kind of. It's just not the case at all. I mean, everyone that's reasonable understands that. You can mock at times, and it's totally appropriate. Jesus mocked at times, even though, you know, Ligon seems to think he has not. But slander is different. Slander is a lie. Slander is not an untruth that you tell to try to ruin someone's reputation, right? So, But yeah, you do have to really kind of think about your own soul when you're doing that, your own intentions, your own situation, right? Because, of course, it is possible to go too far. And this is something that I think about all the time. And, you know, if you're out there and you're mocking, you know, the powers that be, you're mocking people online or even in person for that matter, you do need to consider that kind of stuff. Like when, you know, and of course it always depends, right? It always depends. Like if I'm hanging out with my brother and I call him an idiot, right? I mean, it's different because I'm not actually saying that you're unintelligent or you're, you know, stupid or something like that. You know, it's just like, hey, what's up, idiot? You know what I mean? Like it's just part of our. It depends on the context. It depends on the situation. It depends on your relationship with the person. Stuff like that. So, of course he's right. Of course he's right. I'm pretty sure, though, that Ligon is in no position to be judging the spiritual maturity of people, random people on the internet. You're in no position to do that, Ligon. And I think that if you're honest with yourself, which you really haven't been honest with yourself this entire conversation, so I have no reason to think that you're actually going to somehow figure this one out. But if you're honest with yourself, you have no idea about the condition of my soul, my heart, and things like that. By the way, let's move on from there. I think I made my point. Somebody asked me in a comment, does Ligon watch your content? And, you know, normally I would say no, and I don't think he's like a religious watcher or anything, but I think Ligon has seen some of my content. And my evidence for this is he said that some of these guys, you know, if you remember, he's like, some of these guys, they'd say, yay, John the Baptist, Jesus, you're a weasel. Which, of course, is insane. No one would ever say that. But weasel, that's a very, very specific word. And that's a word that, as far as I'm aware, I'm the only person that's Moscow adjacent that uses the word weasel. And I use it quite often. So it's not like if you just a random word you picked out of nowhere, you'd never seen my content, or you watch my content and you might have missed it because I only say it every now and then. I say it all the time. I call people weasels all the time because people act like weasels all the time. So Ligon Duncan, you know, he pays no attention to the non-anti-Big Eva content, but I don't know. I think he might. I think he might watch the old 80 Robles YouTube channel, which I find quite hilarious because I'm just a random, you know, Joe. But no, I happen to know that I don't know about Ligon specifically, but I happen to know that there are some big names that watch my content and that don't like it, but yet still watch it. So yeah, you know, I mean, you could pretend to be too cool for school. I don't even pay attention to it. I don't know, but yeah, we know better. I've gotten some interesting emails from the inside, people that you probably know and trust, Big Eva goons, that say how frustrated they are with watching some of my content. Yeah, you can keep pretending you don't know, but I know better, and I'm willing to bet. If I had to put some money down right now, I'd put all my Bitcoin on I don't have any Bitcoin. I put all my Bitcoin on. Ligon has watched my content before. And in fact, I think more than once. I think maybe even often. So there you go. There you go.
And so, people, I want to go, like, do you know yourself at all?
I think Ligon Duncan has watched more of my content than I've watched of his, which is not saying much. I mean, that could be like 5 videos.
I mean, do you have any self-awareness whatsoever? Do you know what you're like? Would anybody in the world go to you, and want to understand the gospel and Christianity, but you're going to be the arbiter of who's faithful and who's not.
This is amazing. So this is just more mudslinging, right? Because what he wants to do is say, do you know what you sound like? AD Robles, I'm going to pretend he's talking to me. Do you know what you sound like? Is anyone going to ever ask you about the gospel and how to be a Christian and stuff like that? And the idea is, the answer is no, nobody would. And this is a point that's often made, right? And it has no basis in reality because Ligon doesn't know me at all. He doesn't know what I do on my free time. He doesn't know who reaches out to me and who doesn't, and stuff like that. And here's the truth, though, and this is, I think, people need to hear this. I really do, because this is actually really important to me. And I think here's what I think. Here's what I think. There's a subsection of people that would never in a million years come to me to hear about the gospel. That is true. There are some people that I am not their cup of tea, and they would not even dream of having a conversation with me. That is true. Ligon Duncan is dead on balls accurate. Dead on balls accurate right there. And that's true. That's very true. There's another subsection of people that would not even for one moment consider going to Ligon Duncan to ask about the gospel, or to ask about how to be a Christian, or to ask about morality, or to ask anything. Because Ligon, you are also not everybody's cup of tea. And those people, while they would not even for a moment consider coming to you, because they don't think you're trustworthy, they don't like your face, they don't like your freaking necktie, whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. They would come to me. They would come to me. There's a dear brother in the Lord who actually just passed away this week. Old guy. He liked me. He loved me like a brother. But I was not his cup of tea. He did not like my style. He did not like my attitude. He did not like, all that kind of stuff. Loved me, though. Loved me. And he actually knew me, right? He actually knew me in real life. Dear brother, man. He passed away just this week. And he came to me one time, and I couldn't do it. I just didn't have the time for it. I didn't have the bandwidth for it, right? But he said to me, AD, I really think you should consider joining me in my prison ministry. And I did not take him up on it, but this is what he told me, and I'll never forget this. He said, your personality, your style, your directness, this is the kind of person that prisoners will actually listen to. You can actually reach these prisoners. And I'm doing my best. He was in prison ministry, and he did a good job. But he said that there are certain people in prison, they don't want to hear from a guy like me, but they would listen to you. And that's really touching, man. I'm getting a little emotional even right now, but that was touching, And I didn't take him up on it. I didn't have the bandwidth for it. I have other things that I'm doing. But he knows me. And he understands this exact point, that for some reason, Ligon in his ivory tower where he can't see the regular people, he doesn't know what we're up to, he doesn't know what we're doing, he doesn't know what we're like. He can't imagine why anyone would come to you. I've got so many emails, messages from people that wouldn't dream of reaching out to someone like you. They don't want to. They don't like it. You're just not their cup of tea. But they would reach out to me, and they do. And they ask about the gospel and about Christ and about Christianity, and they've got their objections and they've got their things. And I'm not here saying, Ligon, that everyone has to be like me. Between the two of us, you're the only one doing that. It's pretty simple. The body of Christ has different members. This is basic theology, Ligon, that I know you know and I know you agree with. Everyone is different. Doesn't make any sense for the hand to say I have no need of the head. It makes no sense for the ear to say I have no need of the knee. It doesn't make any sense. But you're trying your best to make it make sense. And you're failing again and again and again. You stay up in your ivory tower. I don't care what you do. But the people down here, the regulars, while they respect you, while they hold you in high esteem, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. How about that? That's my counter offer. That's my counter offer. How about you mind your own business? You worry about the people in your flock, in your congregation, and this my old brother, God rest his soul, he's with the Lord now. He can worry about me. How about that? That's my counter offer.
Social media has encouraged us in that direction because anybody with a cell phone can opine to the entire known universe.
This is the thing. This really bothers him. This really bothers him that an idiot like me can, in his opinion, I'm an idiot. I happen to know that I'm pretty smart. I've got enough. Nah, I'm not going to say that line again. It's been tested. It bothers him, though, that I can have any hearing whatsoever. The playing field has been leveled, and we can go toe-to-toe with a massive intellect like Ligon Duncan, and I do mean that seriously. I know it sounds like a joke, but I'm not joking. I mean that seriously. And I could pick apart the nonsense that he says in about 5 seconds flat, and it makes sense because it's the truth. And he's like, well, who are you? Where did you go to school? This is ridiculous. Look, the time for like credentials to be the only way you get by, I've got the credentials, therefore listen to me, that time is over. It's over. Credentials are great. I'm not against credentials. But the thing is, in our modern times, credentials have to actually be backed up with substance. They have to be backed up with action. I don't give two rips how many freaking PhDs you have. If you think that to get the vaccine is a sign of how you love your neighbor, you are wrong, and I am right. Simple as that. Simple as that. A lot of people don't trust PhDs, and I understand why. And I pretty much don't trust PhDs, but PhDs in and of themselves are not a bad thing. That's for sure. But being able to point to your credentials is not just going to fly anymore. You got to do a lot more than that. You actually have to have the conversation, like this whole thing where you're like, well, I'm not going to have the conversation, but if I did, man, I would have you in a chokehold in 5 seconds, and you'd be in the fetal position, and that's not going to fly anymore. That's internet LARPing. That's internet stuff. Who cares? We don't care about that anymore. Have the balls, the cojones. Have the cojones to go on cross-politic. You do that, Ligon, even if you get decimated, which you most certainly would, they'd be nice to you, though. They'd be nice to you. My respect for you would go through the roof. You'll never do it, so I'm not too worried about that.
And so when, I really, by the way, I think that Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death,
fantastic,
explains all of this.
Yeah.
Now, the illustrations are out of date.
Dated,
You'll laugh at them,
et
cetera. But he explains this whole dynamic 40 years ago. And when your vision for faithfulness in engagement is a food fight, whether it's on television or whether it's on Twitter, or X, then you're going to have a very different view of what it means to be faithful in relation to your culture. And a lot of it is just feeding ego, and a lot of it's envy, And again, a lot of it is driven by a desire to be important.
Yeah.
Very unimportant people who want to be important.
Brother,
they're very unimportant people. No, not like me. I am important, but they're very unimportant. They're trying to be important. You know what I mean? I love that kind of stuff, and honestly, like, I love Doug Wilson, as you guys know. I mean, he's a hero of mine. It's simple as that. But when he says it's envy, that's just one of those things. Doug says that about when people talk badly about the Jews, it's just envy, whatever. It's just so easy to throw that accusation out there, and it doesn't have to be based in reality. It's just something you throw out there, and it's expected to land. And it's just these accusations. You're just jealous. You're just envious. You want to be important. It's just so easy to throw that stuff out there, and it's not based in reality. He doesn't know the people from Moscow in that way. He doesn't know me like that. He doesn't know what I care about. It's just as simple as that. It's just one of those things that it's just more mudslinging to throw it out there. I mean, I could do the same thing, and I have done the same thing, where I think that all the woke stuff, it was just like a desire to be loved by the world a little bit more, and I can base that in some evidence, and because when I do it, I usually do it in response to something that I'm seeing in front of me right now, and so you can go back and you can make your decision. It's just an opinion of mine, but you can go back and say, okay, well, he's talking about X, Y, Z. 80's wrong on that one, or 80's right on that one. I could see why he would say that, but when Ligon does it, Ligon just says it. And he doesn't give you any examples. It's obviously an opinion. I mean, we're not going to be upset about him with an opinion, but he just throws it out there without naming anyone, without saying anything in particular, without pointing out something in particular. This is how big evil lies often. This is what they do. And so you have no way to check it. You could just be like, well, I feel he's right, or I feel he's wrong. Like there's nothing to it, right? There's no substance to it. You're not actually talking about anything. Of course, it's an opinion, but at least with an opinion where there's an example, you could be like, 80 gets this one wrong. People do that all the time in the comments. By the way, I appreciate you for doing that. I don't take it as antagonistic. I don't always agree with you, but I appreciate when you think I'm wrong on something. Someone did that yesterday about Ligon. And I didn't agree. Anyway, but yeah, that's just what it is. It's just mudslinging completely out of context, so there's just no way to fact check at all.
Hard out at 7:40. Let me ask you this. You will not hurt my feelings. I wanted to get your thoughts on theonomy. I doubt you can answer that in 1 minute. Do you have another minute to answer that, or should we just cut it right here?
Let's go.
Okay.
Let's go. I'm yours.
You will not hurt my feelings if you say, I just got to go.
I wrote.
Why does he always close his eyes? It's so weird. Does anyone have any information for me on that one? You won't hurt my feelings if you why? It's so strange. It's very strange. I think it's a body language thing. I think it's an embarrassment thing that the body just kind of unconsciously does when you're saying something that is embarrassing. Like you don't even want to look. It's just like, I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know what you think about the closing the eyes thing. I don't get it. But anyway, we're gonna move into theonomy here. Let's see. Do I have time for this? Yeah, I've got time for this. Let's do it.
Wrote on theonomy as a young professor at RTS in the early 1990s. Greg Bunson wrote Theonomy and Christian Ethics while he was a professor at RTS Jackson in the mid-1970s.
I did not know that.
So theonomy was a ground zero kind of issue when I came to RTS Jackson. And so I had to develop a lecture for it in my ethics course. And that eventually became a book, which I finished in 1995 or 1996, but by that time, theonomy was already in retreat in Reform circles. Yeah. And so I put it on the shelf and I thought, this will never be relevant again for the rest of my life. And then behold, for the last 7 years or so, I see the zombie coming out of the grave.
With force.
And, yes, the law of God, the zombie of the law of God is coming out of the grave. Well, he's given his little backstory about his startup in theonomy. I'll give you mine. Some of you guys know this, some of you guys don't. But when I became a Christian, my go-tos were like Matt Chandler and who was the guy who yelled a lot? I don't remember. Driscoll, Keller, all the normal guys that you expect. And then I randomly found Rushdoony. And I found Rushdoony through Gary North because I had actually been a libertarian for a while, and Gary North used to write for a libertarian blog called Lou Rockwell. Every week he'd have a column, and I loved his columns. And this was before I was a Christian. I loved his columns. And then I became a Christian, and I found out that Gary North was a Christian, not only a Christian, but like a pretty awesome Christian. So I found Theonomy through that, and I remember reading the Theonomy books, like the standard stuff, and my mind was completely blown. I mean, I'd never heard anyone take the law as seriously as they did, and I didn't agree with everything I read, but it was just a whole new world for me. And Theonomy, like the Christian Reconstruction stuff, there's definitely some novel stuff there, some new stuff. But as far as taking the law seriously in the civil realm and how the civil law applies in the civil realm, that was not new. That's something that the Reformed tradition had always debated, had always kicked around, had always believed that the civil realm had some duty to obey the Lord. And so I just remember being very angry because, I'd never heard anything like it before, and it made perfect sense that the civil government would have some duty before the Lord. And I remember being angry that nobody had ever taught me that before, because they'd like to pretend like it's brand new. Now, again, hear me saying there is some parts of Christian Reconstruction that I think are new. That being said, it's not that the civil realm, has a duty before the Lord to apply the law in certain ways. Like that's not new. So it's interesting that he tries to present this as a zombie. I mean, if anything, it's, I guess, maybe a half zombie. I don't know. I don't know.
So I've actually, Jonathan Lehman reached out and asked if we could republish some of that material in the 9 Marks
for the journal
magazine on Reconstructionism. I said, absolutely. And I've realized I need to address that again. So I would say that Theonomy and the larger Reconstruction movement around it was a well-meaning but misguided cultural overreaction to some theological things in American culture and to some cultural and political things in American culture. I think that if you look at the time when Theonomy is developing, Rushdoony, North, Bonson, the original folks that sort of spread the word, the dominant theology of evangelicalism in those days was dispensational antinomianism.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, okay, we're going to do the opposite.
And a lot of neutral public square talk. Yeah.
And then at the same time there was a gradual rise of the sort of conservative movement in America through from before Reagan through Reagan,
the moral majority,
and then the moral majority.
Let me explain something to you, because you remember Ligon Duncan's fake weeping, and I keep bringing that up because it was totally fake. Completely fake, and it's very obvious. We can, maybe I'll link to the video where he's fake weeping, so you can make the determination on whether it was real or not. I think it's obviously fake. He's crying, and then a second later, he's cracking jokes, right? So, in that he says that we got to go a little woke. This is what he essentially says. We got to go a little woke, because this is the dadgum second commandment. I mean, the second commandment applies, and stuff like that. So it's okay to be a theonomist to Ligon, so long as you're doing it in the fake, gay, liberal way. The way that is not really based in God's law. It's based on what you wish God's law said, essentially. The dadgum second commandment, it applies to the civil realm as long as it's something that is regime approved. But the minute you start saying, the second command, the second greatest commandment applies, and it applies in the way that God originally meant it, which is, the latter 6 commandments of the law, and and there's a lot of information in the law about how it applies, and we don't have to necessarily make the book of Leviticus our law, but we have to look at that and say, well, how does the general equity apply here, and all that stuff. And if you do that in a conservative, awesome way, well, then that becomes a well-meaning but misguided, kind of thing for him. This is what it boils down to for Ligon Duncan. So, maybe like affirmative action and reparations are okay. I'm not sure what he believes on that. But he wouldn't come down too hard on that stuff. Maybe that's okay, but yeah, banning homosexuality, making that a criminal offense again, that's just what? You know what I mean? It's just that's how it works, right? The dadgum second commandment only in the liberal gay way.
And a lot of these folks ended up being advisors to some, fairly significant public figures and politicians.
Yeah.
And I think there was a very optimistic postmillennial expectation that we're going to not only take back this country, we're actually going to establish, a theonomic.
We're really doing it.
State.
Yeah,
we're going to do it.
The Puritans would be proud.
There you go. And so that, I think that was.
That's an interesting comment from Sean DeMars, right? Because if you remember, Ligon Duncan describes this as a zombie, a monster to be slain that just resurrected. It's started in the 90s, and then it's resurrected now, and now you gotta put the bullet in the head to kill the zombie and stuff like that. That's how he described it. But then Sean says, "Oh, the Puritans would be proud," which is an interesting comment because it kind of reveals that, Reformed people have been, talking about this kind of thing, maybe not the exact same thing, but this kind of thing since the inception of the nation, since the beginning of the nation, which is weird because that would be like, I guess the zombies resurrected a few times. I mean, what exactly is being said here? What exactly is being said here? Don't these guys like the Puritans? I mean, I assumed he did. I mean, I don't know. I know some people don't like the Puritans. Very interesting comment because it kind of like shows you that, this is actually these issues, that these debates, these conversations, these are reform debates. These are reform and I honestly do believe that if Ligon didn't choose to clip his own nuts, and to only talk about things that are approved, I think that it would be awesome, and he would do a really good job engaging with Stephen Wolf's book, with all of the wealth of Reformed patriarchs, positions in it. I think he could do a good job engaging. I think it would be a very interesting thing because he would have to admit that this kind of thing, this idea of a Christian nation, a Christian magistrate, that's part of the Reformed tradition. That's very Reformed. And this guy knows it. I mean, this guy's a scholar, right? He knows that. But he can't admit that because that's not approved. Man, how awesome would it be to see Ligon Duncan seriously engage Stephen Wolf's book? Without all the nonsense about racism and kinism and all that stuff, right? Without the nonsense of saying, oh, this is just Rushdoony 3.0. Like, it's obviously not Rushdoony 3.0. And I like Rushdoony. I'm not saying this from a position of I think Rushdoony sucks. I like Rushdoony. But Stephen Wolf's book is not Rushdoony. It isn't. It's not even close. Anyway, yeah.
The background. I think what's happening now, we've never been further away from that possibility in our culture than we are now. And just like the abortion abolition.
Listen to this for a second. Like, he's using as an example of why it's so stupid and ridiculous that we've never been further from the possibility of having a Christian nation and actually doing some good for the kingdom of the Lord in the civil realm. But weren't you like fighting against it? So like what is, so I'm fighting against it and now he's using as evidence we've never been further. Like, okay, so how should I interpret that? Like, so does that mean you are right? You're on the right side of history because we've never been further from having a Christian magistrate like that. So I guess you were right. Like, all along, you did a good job. You fought for your king. How am I supposed to interpret that? It's so bizarre. It's bizarre. It really is like he's proud and satisfied of losing. This is why people call it loser theology, because he's almost like taking credit for being on the right side of history, and the evidence is because we've never been further from a Christian magistrate. It's like, What? Man, it's very strange. Very strange. Anyway, we're about to get into the abolition thing. This is just gold here.
Movement. Roe v. Wade gets struck down and suddenly there's an abortion abolition movement. And you go, well, like, where were you like for the last 50 years while all these evangelical pro-life people were out here, scraping and clawing and trying to do what they could do to roll back Roe v. Wade? Same thing.
Stop there for a second, okay? So there's just so much here. There's multiple lines of attack, and this is something that a lot of people have noticed, where they're like, AD, you missed XYZ, you missed this, you missed that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, some of it I did really miss, some of it I didn't, but it's just like there's always 5 lines of attack on what he's saying, because what he's saying is just so, first of all, it's factually incorrect, but it's also just, it's bizarre. Think about this for a second, okay? So we're going to start with the factual problems. He says, Roe v. Wade gets overturned, and suddenly, where were you? I mean, suddenly the abolitionists are here. What? Where were you the last 50 years? And that's just, I mean, the abolitionists have come out in droves to talk about how untrue that is. That's not how it is, Ligon. You lied again. I mean, I don't know how many lies we're up to here, but there's tons. There's probably 20. Probably 20 lies, a couple dozen here. He lied again. And so, listen, I mean, I haven't been a Christian for all that long. I mean, I told you the other day about the street preaching conference I went to. Man, probably at this point, that was maybe 10 years ago. I don't know, maybe a little more than 10 years ago. So 10 years ago was when I met Rusty Thomas, and Rusty Thomas was involved with Operation Rescue, and I know he was involved with Operation Rescue for a lot longer before that, probably since the 80s, if I had to guess, right? And so, they weren't called abolitionists back then. That's a newer term, but the idea of abolishing abortion has been around for freaking decades, man. Decades. And you know that, Ligon, and so does Sean DeMars. He knows that. They didn't spring up out of the depths of hell like the way he wants you to pretend that it did after Roe v. Wade was abolished or overturned or whatever. Why do this? Why lie like that? Now, that's one issue. I'm not going to go too much into that because the abolitionists out there know the history a lot better than I do. It's just factually incorrect. But think about what he's saying for a second here. He's trying to make this seem bad somehow, right? So let's just pretend, let's just join Ligon's fantasy land for just a moment and pretend that the abolitionists didn't exist before Roe v. Wade. And then Roe v. Wade was overturned. Great news. And now people are saying, great, we're gaining some ground. I'm an abolitionist now. Not only should we overturn Roe v. Wade, we should abolish abortion. We should abolish abortion. So not only is it not protected by the Constitution, but we should actually make it a crime. We should abolish abortion. Man, we're gaining ground. We're gaining momentum. You know, people start to get optimistic. They're saying, man, we can really do this. We can look, all those pro-lifers out there, they were scraping and clawing, and finally they did it. You know, they did it. They finally got, but we can do better. We can do better. Let's do it. That's his fantasy land, right? That's what people were thinking. If that was the case, why throw shade on that? He just got done saying we've never been further from the reality of a moral Christian government. Roe v. Wade gets overturned. What are these abolitionists thinking? What, these guys are crazy. Does that not just again? We're operating in his fantasy land here. This is the fantasy land of Ligon Duncan. Does not what he just said about Roe v. Wade gets overturned contradict what he said about we've never been further? Never been further. It certainly seems to. But then even if it does, okay, whatever, he's confused, whatever. Why is he trying to throw cold water on a movement that sees momentum and says, man, those pro-lifers, good job. Now let's go for the whole thing. Let's go for the whole enchilada. We're gaining ground here. Why throw cold water on that, Ligon? Ligon, that's pathetic. That is sad. How did you get this way, Ligon? How did you become so pathetic and sad? Why would you want to throw water on that? Why would you want to present that as if that's a negative? Why? It's bizarre. It is bizarre. It's like we've never been further from a moral government. But then now we kind of got a little closer, and now these abolitionists want to make it even more. We got to go back to that point when we've never been further from it, because that's my mission. What a mess. What a mess. What a confused, weird, bizarre. It's grotesque, is what it is. This is a grotesque view of how the Christian should engage culture. What is he actually saying here? Because it does not look good. It's almost like he prefers us to be as far away as possible from a Christian and a moral government. That's like his preference. It is grotesque.
Thing with Reconstructionism, you know, just like you were saying, friends from other countries look at this like talk to your Chinese friends. Yeah. How impractical is this?
I don't live in China. I don't live in China. What does it matter if they think it's impractical or not? I live in the United States, and we just overturned Roe v. Wade, and we could actually abolish abortion in many states. We could do it if we wanted to. We could do it if we planned appropriately. And so why do I freaking care if someone from the Qingdao region doesn't see how this is practical? It's practical here. There are many states where it's possible. And don't give me this bull about how states have banned abortion. No state has banned abortion, but it's possible. And we could do it. So let the Chinese worry about their situation, because their situation is very different, and I have sympathy for them and I feel for them. But my situation in New Hampshire is different from China, and my situation in New Hampshire is different from Tennessee and Texas and Florida. It's really not that doable here in New Hampshire at this moment. At this moment, it's not doable. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but it does mean that it's not as doable as it is potentially in Florida or Texas or Alabama or Georgia or whatever name your state. So if I lived in Alabama, am I going, think about my brothers in California. I mean, they can't even do it. They think it's crazy. What do I care? I don't live in California. Let's do it here. It's not that I don't care about the Chinese. It's just that I don't live in China. I have no power in China. I have a little power here in New Hampshire. It's so impractical. I mean, think about Saudi Arabia. They can't have a Christian nation there, so you can't have a Christian nation here. It's got to be even. What a joke. This is grotesque. It's grotesque is what this is. What a joke.
Utterly impractical in most parts of the world to even think in these ways.
Who cares? Who cares? Why does that matter to the man sitting in Alabama on the legislature? Why? It doesn't. It doesn't. He might care deeply about China. He might send missionaries to China. He might fund missionaries to China. But he's a legislator in Alabama. And he's got to care a lot more about Alabama. Why is this so difficult? He wants to lose. He wants it to be as bad as it could be. What other explanation could there be? Yeah, I know you have the possibility of banning abortion in Alabama, but think about the Chinese before you do it. It absolutely boggles the mind. It boggles the mind.
And so, again, you can be really brave, and you can have these really strong opinions, and you can think you're really pure, and you're the one true believer in everyone's midst. And there's no possibility of this being implemented in any possible world.
Yeah.
I think we'll come back to that statement in just in the next episode, and we'll probably do 2 more, and maybe 1 more. We'll see. There's no possibility of abortion abolition in any possible world. This is one of the most grotesque, limp-wristed, well, I could say a lot more, but being a Christian man, I won't. That is one of the worst things I've heard any Christian leader say ever. No exaggeration. No exaggeration. It's pathetic. It's grotesque. It is one of the worst possible things I've ever heard any Christian leader say ever about cultural engagement. When I heard that for the first time, it's one of those like jaw hits the floor moments. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm going to be straight up with you, okay? So before I say this, I'm going to say that I believe that Ligon Duncan is a believer. I believe he's a Christian. I believe his sins are forgiven, okay? But when I heard that statement, I thought to myself, remember he said, abortion abolition cannot be implemented in any possible world. And the thought I had when I first heard that, I don't have the same religion as Ligon Duncan. We worship 2 different gods. How can you interpret that any other way? How can this man have the same religion as me? That was my thought. How can we believe in the same Almighty God? How can we be reading the same book of Exodus? How can we be reading the same book of Ezra and Nehemiah? How is it possible? There's so much in there, and that's what it's for, guys. It's not for so you can read it and you can be the smartest guy around and get your MDiv and you could debate the esoteric stuff. No, that stuff is there. The history is there so you can see the amazing miracles, the works that God has done, the Almighty God, where he takes this people that really nothing special and he does these amazing things for them that nobody could ever have done themselves. And he delivers them. He delivers them. You're supposed to read that and have confidence in the Lord and have a faith that God can move mountains. And I get it. It's hard, man. It's hard sometimes when you face big obstacles, right? And there's things in your life that you just feel like you can't overcome. And it's hard to believe. I get it, man. I get it. But man, that's what's so beautiful on Sunday, man. You go to church on Sunday. You've been through a hard week, right? You've been through a hard week. Nothing went right, and you're praying, and you're just like, God, what's going on? And you can't see a way out. You can't see a solution. And you go to church on Sunday, man, and some of the people know what you're going through. Some of them don't. But everyone's there, singing the praises of God, remembering the mighty, mighty works of God. and you go and you're invited to the table again, and you remember the things that God has accomplished amongst his people, and you're reading Exodus, you're reading these amazing stories, you're reading the book of Genesis and Joseph and all this stuff, and you just remember, it's like, man, like my problems seem kind of small, or maybe they seem big. But man, there's been so many times where there were big problems, and God just did these miracles. And you can see what it was all for, and you can go back and look at that, and it builds your faith, it builds your confidence, it builds your trust in that Lord who is almighty, who is all powerful, who is all good, who works all things out for the good of his people. We get all that. And on Sunday, don't you just feel recharged? You feel like I don't know how it's going to happen, but man, I trust the Lord. I mean, that's my religion. We all have moments, man. We all have moments where we think, just like Ligon does there, like there's no possible world where this is going to be, like good is going to be accomplished. There's no possible world. You know, to hear a Christian leader talk this way, I just wonder, like, what's going on with him? He doesn't seem like he's in a good place. And if you're friends with Ligon, I mean, ask him about this. This seems like despair. This seems like the pit of despair. This is not something to be proudly proclaiming on the Room for Nuance podcast. This is something that you take to your pastor. You don't make people think that this attitude is appropriate, especially when you're in a position of power, Ligon, a position of authority, a position of influence. This is grotesque. And I think you need to look yourself in the mirror, talk to your pastor, and figure out what's going on in your soul. Anyway, maybe we'll come back to it. I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.